Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. I'm glad that you're here. Get yourself some popcorn, get yourself something to drink because we're going to talk about quite a lot and this might be one of the most important videos you'll ever see on the mid lane. Now, if you don't know, my name is Kine. I'm a League of Legends player, content creator and coach, and for my recent coachings, yet again I have been proven that people struggle way too much in the lane phase and that's where typically their game already goes wrong. So I'm going to fix that for you guys. I'm going to fix that for my students. I'm going to fix it for you. And I'm going to give you guys this free crash course here on the mid lane fundamentals, how to specifically win the early lane phase or how to play the early lane phase here specifically for the mid lane. Now forget me if sometimes I take a breath or a pause because I'm currently quite sick actually. I have swollen tonsils in my throat and I'm getting to the better hand right now. Like I'm getting a little bit better, but I'm still not there yet. So bear with me for this video. So first of all, we're going to talk about the types of matchups and how to play accordingly to those different types of matchups. We're going to be talking about freezing versus poking enemies under the turret. We're going to be talking about warding and a little bit of jungle tracking. We're going to talk about basic trading fundamentals. There's 3. And we're also going to be talking about reset timers and preventing enemies from getting their resets. And then last but not least, we're going to be talking about teleport versus ignite. And the last concept will be tempo. Okay, so that's a very quick breakdown here on what we're going to be looking at. But let's start with the 3 types of different matchups. So in League of Legends, there's 3 types of matchups. Now, what do I mean? Currently, I am playing Yone. You might not see it because I'm having a skin, but I'm playing Yone here in a practice tool game. And what type of player or what type of champion is Yone? He's a melee type of champion. So in the mid lane here, compared to like top lane you typically have melee versus melee matchups. In the mid lane, you have different types of matchups. You have, a lot of times you have melee versus ranged, or range versus ranged, or melee versus melee. And those are the 3 types of matchups that you have in the mid lane. So melee versus melee, range versus range, melee versus range, right? And we're going to talk about each of them because there are fundamental game plans that you need to know whenever you play in one of those 3 types of matchups. So first, let's start with the melee versus ranged. So right now I am playing Yone, and let's say we're playing into a ranged champion like an enemy Victor, or a Hui, or a Xerath, whatever it may be. But for the sake of this video, let's make it easy, and I'm always going to refer to the ranged champion as Victor. So, if I'm the melee champion in the Victor lane, I need to understand, if I need to know how I need to play, I need to understand how the enemy wants to play. Why do I need to know how the enemy ranged champion, how the enemy Victor likes to play? Because he's going to have the upper hand in the lane. It's very simple. How do I determine, or how do I know that Victor has the upper hand in the lane? Well, starting at level 1, I'm a melee champion, so I have no tools to get onto Victor or to poke him from afar. Whereas Victor has ranged auto attacks and ranged abilities like his Q or his E that can easily allow him to bully me from a distance. So whenever I want to walk up to the minion wave to last hit minions, I should always take damage from the ranged attacks from Victor. And I can never trade back, right? Because I'm melee. So he can just stand here and hit me and I can never trade back. So whenever I walk up for a minion, I should lose HP. Now, if I keep on doing that, I will be so low HP that I will be forced to recall, or I will die in lane, or I won't be able to walk up to the wave, so I will lose all the prio in the lane, right? So I need to avoid doing that. So I need to make sure that in the early lane, I don't take too much damage whenever I want to go for a last hit. So that means that I either want to bait out Victor's abilities, or that I just want to play safe and soak XP over getting the last hit. That's going to be a very important concept here. Now, as the Victor, what does the Victor want to do? Knowing that I at level 1 here can't do anything, the Victor should look to slow push the wave. And why should he slow push the wave? Why should he just last hit minions rather than fast pushing it? It's very simple, because we just established this. If the Yone walks up early on, he takes damage. If Yone keeps on doing that, he becomes low and he might even die. So can Yone consistently walk up to the wave to last hit? He cannot. So Victor, there's no need for the Victor to push. He can just last hit because Yone will not be able to last hit all the minions because otherwise he would be way too low and even die. So therefore, Yone will play safe level 1 and Victor will look to slow push, maximizing his time to bully the Yone until the wave gets to the turret. Because once Victor, his wave, gets to Yone's turret, it becomes much harder for him to bully the Yone because now the Victor will be overextended so he can easily get ganked. Maybe he gets all in by the Yone, and it just doesn't feel that good. Also, there's a turret, so he can't be as aggressive or he might take turret shots, etc. So Victor needs to maximize the time that he like that he's before the turret rather than under the turret with the minion wave. That's why he will last hit the minions as slowly as possible, and while he's doing that, he's going to try to bully the Yone as much as possible. And why is that also the case? Well, Victor, once he has crashed the wave under my turret here, so I'm the Yone, the enemy Victor slow pushed the first wave, the second wave, and then on the third wave, he finally crashes the wave. So the third cannon wave, he finally crashes it under my turret. Now I'm already slightly lower, maybe like 50% HP, because I had to walk up for last hits and I'm a little bit low. Now, if that's the case, what the Victor should do right now is he would let the wave bounce back towards him and look to just last hit while it's pushing back towards him and trim the wave a little bit, and then set up a freeze. Why is setting up a freeze for the Victor so good? Well, if I'm a melee champion, so that means if I need to last hit a minion, I need to walk up all the way towards the minion. If the wave is here, that means I have to walk up all the way to here, making it for me, one, very hard to all-in the Victor because he's close to his turret. It makes it easier for Victor to all-in me, and I'm a lot more gankable. And typically, when a ranged champion freezes you at level 3, level 4, that's typically around the time that junglers like to gank you, between 3 and 4 minutes. Because again, they slow push the first wave, the second wave, and then the third wave they typically crash. Then on the third wave they start letting it bounce towards them, and by the time you're here frozen on their side of the lane, that's when you typically get ganked by junglers between the 3 and 4 minute mark. So be aware of that. So if we are in this position where we can easily get ganked, and where we are going to get frozen, we need to minimize the damage that we're going to take level 1, 2, and 3, right? We need to make sure that we're very healthy so that when the wave is pushing away, that we can slow push, last hit the minions, build a big wave if possible, and then once we're here, look to push out the wave, and if we're still healthy enough, Victor cannot stop us from doing that. Because even if we decide to use our auto attacks and abilities on the wave to push it, and Victor uses his abilities and auto attacks on us, he should not be able to kill us because we're still very healthy. However, if we are at level 1, we always walk up, at level 2, we always walk up, at level 3, we always walk up to the wave to last hit minions, and we take attacks from the Victor, we are so low that once the wave bounces back towards his direction, and he decides to freeze it, now maybe I'm only like 30% HP. And now I cannot break the freeze. It's impossible for me because I only have 30% HP. If I use everything on the wave to push it in, and Victor uses everything on me to stop me from doing so, I will actually die. So it's very important that as a melee champion into a ranged champion, you tend or you try to stay as healthy as possible on the first couple of waves so that you know that you cannot get frozen on later in the lane. So then that's your goal as the melee champion. Try and stay as healthy as possible level 1, 2, 3. So that around level 4 or 5 you can make sure this freeze never happens. You can just shove it out. And once you shoved out the wave, that's the main goal done for the melee champion. That's when you can go for a recall, spend your first gold on your first recall, come back to lane, and now typically the lane is a lot easier because around this point in time, the melee champion typically has become a lot stronger. He's close to level 6, he has his first 3 abilities unlocked, which allows him typically to run enemies down like a Fizz Q or E, like a Hui E, like, I don't know, like there's many, like most melee champions unlock a dash or unlock all-in potential once they have their 3 abilities. So if you can get through those stages in the beginning of the game safely without dying or without getting frozen upon, that's when you basically win the lane. If you get through that stage easily, then the next part of the game becomes even easier. Now, for the ranged champion, right, that's the game plan. So the Victor tries to freeze us. If that doesn't work and we get to crash it, it becomes a lot more scary for the Victor. Because if the Yone here crashes the wave at like level 4 or 5, and he puts it under the Victor's turret, Hui can recall, come back, so he recalls, spent his gold, comes back to lane, and now the wave will be pushing towards him. And by the time the Yone arrives in the lane, the wave will be here on Yone's side, and he will be hitting level 5 or level 6 around this time. When do mid laners hit level 6? Around the 5:30 cannon minion wave in the mid lane. So that's when it's 5 minutes and a half, there's a cannon minion wave in the mid lane. On that wave, you hit 6 as a mid laner if you didn't miss too much XP. So that's the standard option. So you typically don't, as the melee champion, you want to prepare your level 6 so that when you recall and come back to lane, the wave will be on your side of the lane the moment you hit level 6, and now you have a very long lane to run down your opponent. the range champion wants to avoid this at all costs by trying to keep the freeze here alive in the early stages of the game. So that's how the early lane phase plays out if you play a melee versus range matchup, or if you play a range versus melee matchup, right? From both perspectives, that's how you should play it. Okay, so we just explained how a melee champion should play versus a range champion, or how the range champion should play it versus a melee champion. We looked at it from both perspectives. Now I'm going to talk about the second type of matchup, which is called ranged versus ranged. Very simple. Again, let's say that the enemy team here has a Victor champion on the enemy team, and we're playing a ranged champion like an Orianna, a Hwei, or Syndra in this case. Now, how should we be playing, starting from level 1, how should we be playing the early lane phase here versus another ranged champion? Well, if we, again, right, just like last time, we're not going to think about jungle matchup so far, we're not going to talk about warding or any, we're just going to simplify it down, and first and foremost, we're going to be talking about the isolated matchup without thinking of any other variables. So in a range versus range matchup, typically all you have to do is push faster than your opponent, already starting from level 1. Now, the reason for it is, first of all, freezes aren't really that good versus ranged champions in general, because they can just break the freeze from a distance with their ranged abilities. So in general, what you're going to be doing is, because you're both ranged, like both of you are typically, if both of you are good, you're going to stand up maximum range from each other, and you're just always going to look to like hit each other and hit the wave and get prio. And trading is a lot less harder when you're playing two ranged champions compared to when you're playing a melee into a ranged champion. It's a lot harder to trade right now because you're always standing at very long range from each other. Now, as a ranged champion, why do I typically want to push instantly faster than my opponent? And it's very simple. You put your opponent in a very bad spot if you're the one that's pushing into him. Let me explain. So at level 1, what do I typically want to do? At 130, the minions spawn in the lane, right? At 130, they're going to be here in the lane, like 128. So I want you to stand here when the enemy minions are already coming to lane, and see if you can auto-attack some of them before the enemy is already here to punish you. If he's here, just back off, right? But if he's not here and you can already get some auto-attacks in when the wave is walking towards you, that's great. Just to already establish some push. Now, why is pushing so great? It gives you multiple advantages, but the main one is this. If I'm pushing, let's say we're level 2, and because I'm pushing faster than the Victor, I'm getting level 2 quicker, so that's already an advantage. And now here we're having a big wave. Now Victor has to make a choice. If the Victor is standing here and my minion wave is here together with me, so like here I would say, I don't need to put a dummy, but like I can just bring it actually. So if this is the enemy Victor and this is my minion wave, now Victor has to make a choice. We're pushing into him, so he has to decide. Does he use his abilities on the wave to make sure he trims the wave and is able to keep it here in this spot so that it doesn't crash? Because if he lets the wave crash, that could potentially be bad for him. We could look to poke him under his turret while he's farming, or we could let the wave bounce back in order to freeze, and maybe that's not something he wants. So Victor is already stuck in a position where he needs to decide, do I go for the wave and try to hold it in this position? But then Syndra can trade for free onto me, right? Because if he goes with his abilities for the wave, I can go with my abilities onto him, and he can never trade back because he used his abilities on the wave to keep it here. So I win the trade for free. That's number 1. 2, let's say I do want to crash the wave because I already have push, even if he uses his abilities on the wave, and I use my abilities on the wave as well, I should just be able to crash it because it's already too late because my wave is already bigger than his. So considering I could match his push, I would just be able to crash it anyway, so again I can do whatever I want. Now let's say Victor doesn't hit the wave and he's okay with us crashing the wave, so now he hits us with his abilities. Well, then we would still have an opportunity to hit him back with our abilities, and since we have a bigger wave, he would take more minion aggro, hence we would win the fight. 2, even if he hits us with abilities and we go for the wave, then we crash the wave anyway, and we might take a recall or the wave will bounce back towards us, so then his trade onto us didn't really matter anyway. So you see, just by pushing, I put the Victor here into a spot where it's very difficult for him to decide what to do. We didn't really have this in the melee versus range matchup because there the melee matchup couldn't really contest the range champion in the early game, so they had to play safe, right? But you kind of force the other range champion in a range versus range matchup into this, like, you kind of force them into the same type of game that you would play versus a melee champion just by pushing quicker than them. So you don't really give them a choice. You get all the prio yourself just by pushing faster than your opponent. And then depending on the matchup, you could, so once you finally, you get the prio in lane, you get the level power spikes, you get the advantages, you can decide to crash the wave or not. Well, let's say at some point we do crash the wave and the enemy is in our dirt farming the minions, we have an opportunity. We could look to recall, come back to lane, and then while we come back to lane, the wave will be here in a spot where we can freeze it. Or maybe we just let the wave push towards us and then freeze it. So we have freezing opportunities, which is great. But if we play a champion that can bully the enemy champion very well under the turret, we can also look to bully them under the turret. Now, typically in a range versus range matchup, you're not looking too much to poke the enemy under the turret because they should be fine, right? Like considering, let's say the minion wave is here. So let's say the enemy minion wave is like here, I would say. So our minion wave is here under the turret and the enemy wants to farm it. Victor could literally be standing there. Well, this is now a friendly, but okay. So Victor could literally stand there and then still hit the minion wave that's here because he's a ranged champion. So it's very difficult for us to like poke him with our abilities, right? It's very difficult. So that's why in range versus range matchups, typically you're not going to look to poke the enemy under the turret when they're also ranged. Unless maybe you're something like a Hui who's very good at poking enemies under the turret, or like a Victor. But other than that, typically you're just going to go for letting the wave push back towards you and look to get a freeze. So basically, if you push in range versus range matchups, that's typically how you're going to win those matchups, how you get the prio, and how you can decide what to do. Because range versus range matchups, they're all about getting prio and being able in a position where you can help your jungler and play the game and scale consistently, right? That's your goal as a mage. You want to scale, and you do that by having the prio in lane so you can do whatever you want. If you're always getting pushed in, you can never do what you want, and then you're not scaling for free because the enemy could maybe roam or do whatever he wants. So in order to scale safely or in order to scale well, you need to be able to put yourself in a position where you can do whatever you want. And typically that's by pushing in the enemy laner and getting prio in the mid lane. So pushing is very, very important into these range versus range matchups, and that's typically how you're going to play out those matchups. Now, how the matchup ultimately, like who's going to win, is typically based on who will hit the most skill shots, but pushing here is going to be the main fundamental that you do want to do into these range versus ranged matchups. Okay guys, and then now let's talk about, well, let's very briefly talk about the melee versus melee matchups. Now, there's a reason why I say very briefly, because melee versus melee matchups are actually very matchup dependent. So, just like in the first example that I gave you guys, if you play something like a Yone into a Victor, it's very easy to say, hey, who wins level 1? Right? It's going to be Victor. Because the Yone has no way to get onto a good Victor. Because Victor is ranged, Yone is melee, right? So Yone will always be punished level 1. Now, if I ask you who is going to win level 1, let's say, I don't know, like Irelia versus Sylas, or Fizz versus Sylas, or whatever, right? One of those melee matchups, immediately it becomes a lot more difficult to start thinking about those matchups. That's because, yeah, it's just two champs are melee, so whoever wins level 1, that's purely based on the matchup and purely based on your understanding of the matchup. So my advice, there's not really much I can tell you about these matchups, as every melee versus melee matchup is going to be different, and there's not just one main fundamental or guideline that you can use for those melee versus melee matchups. So what I would suggest is that whenever you play a melee versus melee matchup, let's say you're like a Fizz main or something, and every single time you play into a melee champion, look on YouTube, look on the internet for like one or like a crash course on that matchup, or maybe just look at like a Korean challenger or your West master or diamond player if you're below diamond, who just plays those matchups, and that might give you an indication of how those people play the game. And I think that will already help you a lot. So when you play melee versus melee, you're really going to have to scan the internet, look for some kind of form to get some extra information on a matchup to start learning it as quickly as possible. So that's hopefully going to be a great help for you guys as well. But those are the three types of mid lane matchups that you have. If you have any questions about them, feel free to leave your questions in the comments down below. Okay guys, and then the next concept that I really want to talk about is freezing versus poking enemies under the turret, because I feel like very few people actually know when to do it. And I feel like it's not even a choice. It's like something that's a consequence of how the game goes. You don't really have to think about it. It's just rational to do it or when not to do it, right? It's like, it comes like second nature. But maybe that's because I played this game too much, who knows. But so, first of all, we can sometimes, like when we're playing range versus melee, I told you that the melee champion cannot really contest this level 1, 2, 3. So we're going to be slow pushing, and then ultimately we're going to end up here, right? When we're playing into range matchup, we also want to push, right? We also want to push because it's going to give us advantages. I already explained that. So then both in, if we play range versus melee or range versus range, ultimately we're going to end up here on this side of the lane. Now, then we could make the choice, once we're here, do we poke the enemy under the turret, or do we decide to let it bounce back towards us and freeze and then try to poke them here when they want to walk up? Well, both scenarios have their positive and their negative sides, right? And maybe let's start with the freezing part here. So we end up pushing towards the enemy side of the lane, and we decide not to poke them under the turret. We decide to let the wave bounce back and look to hold it here. This is something that I like to do in 2 situations, or even 3 situations. One, when I have a ganking jungler, like a Rammus or a Shaco, I like to hold the wave here and not be overextended, because if I'm always here overextended, pushing the enemy under the turret and poking them, how is my Shaco ever going to gank the enemy mid laner? I have a ganking jungler, but I'm basically making sure that he cannot gank, which is very bad, because then if he plays versus a scaling jungler, the enemy scaling jungler, the Cartus or something, might actually get an advantage, because my Shaco does not have any gank opportunities on the map, making his champion useless. So if I have a ganking champion, I would much rather hold the wave here, look to hold it here, ping my jungler, and then give him opportunities to come and gank and get some free kills and snowball the lane that way. Now, we can also think of the enemy jungle matchup. If the enemy jungle has a Cartus, and I also have like a scaling jungler like an Evelynn, who at the very least wants to scale to level 6, I could also in the early game just perma push and indeed poke the enemy under my turret, because yeah, the enemy has a scaling jungler, they don't want to gank, right? So then it wouldn't make too much sense to freeze, because I'm not really going to get ganked by the enemy jungler, so I don't have to be scared of getting ganked. That means I can just perma push. So if they have a ganking jungler as well, then I would probably not do this. Now, what's also important to know is that if the enemy champion is like a very great all-in champion, so let's say something like a Sylas or something, right? Even though you can poke him under his turret, it's also a little bit like less safe to be here, because he's very good at all-inning, or like a Sylas or a Yone or something, right? Or a Fizz. They can easily all-in you. So against those champions, I feel a lot more safe, even like disregarding the jungle matchup. I just feel a lot more safe in general to be on my side of the lane than to be on their side of the lane. Even though I could poke them under the turret, if I screw up once by misplacing my W or something, they can just all-in me and perhaps kill me. So it's very dangerous against those champions to push, and then typically I will just look to freeze. Now, if I play into, like, let's say I'm playing into something like a Corki, right? A Corki, Victor into Corki. Victor is very favored in this matchup. Corki can't really do anything. He's a lot more short range than the Victor. So let's say, disregarding the jungle matchup, I could just actually perma push here, and I could just constantly poke the Corki under his turret, because I'm not really scared of Corki all-inning me, right? He's not one of those great all-in champions like a Yone or something. So I'm not really scared of getting all-in, and he's short range, so I can constantly bully. Right, so I don't have to freeze him here. And now hopefully you notice that I say, so I don't have to. So if I say I don't have to freeze him, does that indicate that freezing also has a very negative side, because it's only something I would like go to as a second resort? Well, kind of, right? The advantage or the disadvantage that you have when you freeze somebody here in the middle of the wave is that they are always in a position to easily move. If there's like a fight happening here, so let's say I'm going to ward this actually, so you can see. But like, let's say there's a fight happening here, and I'm just freezing the wave. My opponent here, even though he's frozen upon, he actually has an easier time moving here, and I cannot move because then he might fight me, right? For example. So he has an easier time moving here actually, even though we're winning the lane and we're freezing. So if you constantly push and poke enemies under the turret, you will also establish prio in the lane. The enemies are stuck farming while you can already move to this fight, and you'll get here first and then probably win the fight because of that. So pushing also and poking enemies on the turret gives you the advantage of always having prio and being in the spot to move. The only, like, what we have to compensate for that with though, is that we can also easier get all-in and easier get ganked. So we kind of want to have best of both worlds. So we're only going to perma push and poke enemies under the turret when our champion allows for that, and when the enemy jungler is not a ganking jungler, and when our opponent is not great at all-inning. If those checkboxes are completed, that's when I typically would decide to poke my opponent. However, if they do have a ganking jungler like a Shaco, like a Rammus, I would freeze. If they are a champion like a Katarina, like a Yone, like a Sylas, champions who can easily all-in me, I would freeze. Things like that, right? So keep those things into account, but again, they are very rational, right? I think all of us know if they have a Shaco, it's probably not smart as an immobile champion like Victor to permanently push. Even though we can abuse the enemy mid laner in the lane, it's not smart because we're permanently going to get ganked. So it's more about rationally thinking about it and then executing on that and making the decision in the game itself rather than like a fundamental that we can do every single game. It's not like, oh, every single game you can just poke when you play Victor. No, it very much depends on the variables in the game. I think that's where the difficulty comes in. I think that's where most people go wrong or why they don't understand it. But now we went over the variables. So now hopefully in your game, you can also assess those variables and see what you need to do based on that. Okay, that's it for the freezing versus poking under our third concept. Okay guys, so we already talked about a lot. We talked about the 3 types of matchups and how to play in them. We talked about freezing versus poking on the enemy turret. And now I want to address and talk about warding. Warding is too inconsistent with too many people. Too many people, they just are inconsistent with it. They don't know when to do it. They don't know how to do it. They forget to do it. And I'm going to fix that in this video. So first things first. Let's say that I'm playing Victor into Yone. So I'm playing a ranged champion and a melee champion. And I know I'm going to push because of that into the enemy. At that point, I typically want to place a ward at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, so 2 minutes and a half in the game, at some side of the map. Now, let that sink in, right? So it's very simple. If I know that I'm in a matchup where I should have the prio and where I'm going to be pushed up for the majority of the lane, then I want to place a ward at around 2 minutes and a half, so 2 minutes and 30 seconds, at some side of the map. The reason for that is most junglers, not all junglers, but most junglers, they typically like to gank mid lane either between 2 minutes 30 seconds and 4 minutes, right? Between that time window, that's when you're typically going to get ganked. So if you place a ward at 2:30, for example, on this side of the map, it will last 90 seconds. So it will last until 4 minutes in the game. That's exactly the gank window. So from 2:30 to 4 minutes, that's exactly the gank window that most junglers like to gank you. So that's why typically around 2:30 you want to place your ward. Of course, if you're pushing, make sure you're not losing minions or like a gold or XP. So if you place it at 2:35 because your wave is in a bad spot, that's completely fine, right? If you place it at 2:20, that's also fine, right? But make sure that you don't miss any gold and XP and then try to place it at around 2:30 on one side of the map. Now, why do I say on one side of the map? Well, it's very simple actually. So it doesn't really matter. If you don't know where the enemy jungler is, it doesn't really matter at what side of the map you place your ward because we're going to hover it anyway. With hovering, I mean we're going to stand close to it. Now, let me explain. If I place a ward, let's say here, right? So I'm going to clear this dummy actually, and I'm going to place a ward, let's say here, right? As long as I stand on this side of the map where I placed a ward, I will always be safe. So, for example, if the enemy jungler comes from here, ganks me from this side, I'm very safe. I'm standing very far away from that side so I can just walk away like this, right? Or maybe even towards the turret. But I'm very safe from this side. Now, if the enemy jungler tries to gank me from here, I'm also very safe, right? Because my ward spots him out, and because of that, there's a very big distance between me and him when I spot him. So even if they come from this side and I stand on this side of the map, I can still walk away. So I'm always safe as long as I place a ward and hover that ward. So with hovering, I mean standing close to it. Now, of course, this concept is a little bit more advanced than that because, of course, it doesn't mean because I place a ward here that I'm always safe from junglers that come from this side. Because if this is an Udyr, if the enemy team has an Udyr jungle, yes, I would be safe from this ward because he can't really go over the wall, right? But if they have a Graves or if they have a Rek'Sai or a Kindred or a Zac or a Jarvan, those type of champions have no problem with jumping over walls. So a Jarvan could easily, for example, just like EQ over this and then maybe ult me at level 6 and, you know, I would be dead. Or like even a Kindred, like pre-level 6, like here at like 2:30, between 2:30 and 4 minutes, you could just jump over the wall. I stand here, I feel safe, I think I see everybody, Kindred jumps here over the wall, and now she runs me down, right? At like level 2 or level 3. And now I can easily get killed. Or at least I need to burn my flash. So depending on what type of the enemy jungler is, the deeper you're going to have to place your ward, or the more you're going to have to adjust your ward position. That's why I typically hate placing a ward here, where most people like it. I typically like to place my ward here. And the reason for that is, look, I'm relatively safe from this side, right? I have a lot of vision here, so if the enemies come from the scuttle crab, I would still see them, right? If they're smart and they come through here, yes, I wouldn't spot them, right? If they walk like this. But typically if they walk like this, I would still see them from the river. And I would see a lot more here if they come from Raptors, which is a lot more likely in the early game. And I would also see them here instantly coming, and I would have a lot of time to react, which is important. Because if I play against a Zac, I need to see him the moment he's here, so that because he can jump over walls, so that I can instantly walk away and perhaps start positioning on this side of the lane where I know Zac cannot reach. So that's something important. So depending on the type of jungler, you want to adjust your warding, right? Maybe if it's a Hecarim or a Rammus, perhaps you could place your ward here if you have time to place it even deeper. Because a Hecarim or a Rammus, they cannot jump over walls, but they, like maybe Hecarim with ult, but let's say like level 2, level 3, they can't really jump over walls. So then you think you might be safe if you just place the ward here or like here, but you're typically not, because they're so fast that even though you see them from a distance, they might still get onto you, specifically if they have flash as well. So that's why against those champions with big gap closers or who are very fast like a Rammus or a Hecarim, you typically want to place your ward either here or even deeper to really make sure you're safe when you are hovering this side of the map. Now, we talked a lot about hovering and things like that. I want to give you guys a side note with that, but in order to avoid all confusion, let me clear the wards here so you don't see any wards anymore on the map. Okay, it's gone. So, I told you just a bit ago, just a while ago, that if you don't know where the enemy jungler is, it's okay to place the ward on whatever side of the map and then just hover it, right? There's no code of like, oh, I need to place it bot lane or something like that. Not really, right? But I do need you to be rational about it. Like, if my jungler started on red buff and is clearing into top side, of course, I'm not going to place my ward at 230 on the bot side. No. My ward at 230, I'm going to place it here on the top side, and then preferably here in this position, because I know my jungler is spawning at the top side, and I don't know where the enemy jungler is, so there is an opportunity, there is a possibility, that my jungler is going to end up here on the scuttle, and that he's going to invade, or that he's going to end up on the scuttle, that the enemy jungler comes, and that both of them fight. And then this ward is also going to spot out the enemy jungler, which is already going to be great. Now, even if this ward doesn't spot out the enemy jungler, let's say that the enemy jungler starts on blue, and there's a full clear, so he does Crux, and then from Crux, he goes to the scuttle, right? My jungler does a full clear, goes to Grump, and then goes into scuttle. So my jungler walks from here, the enemy jungler walks from here. So this ward would never spot the enemy jungler, right? It would still be good then to place the ward on this side of the map, simply because if they are going to fight, my jungler and the enemy is going to fight, because I stand here already on this side of the map, I can quickly move. If I were to place a ward here, so for example, I would place my ward here, and then as a result of that, I would always stand on this side of the map, and now my jungler is on this scuttle crab fight, and the enemy jungler is here, I cannot move. If my lane opponent stands here, and I stand here, my lane opponent will get quicker to the fight than I will, and that means I will typically lose the fight. So look to ward close to your jungler, so that you can always, like when he's getting collapsed or when he's making a play, you can always instantly react, go help him with the objective, go help him with an invade, go help him with a scuttle fight, things like that. Now, that's it for 230. Once your ward expires at 230, you will get a second ward, a second trinket here, and then you will be able to place it at 4 minutes, for example, on the other side of the map, or just again on this side of the map, and then hover it. Now, let's say you don't have a ward, but you know where the enemy jungler is, because you don't always need to place a ward in order to be safe. For example, if I see that the enemy jungler just ganked my bot lane, and I'm standing here, for example, like I was just standing here in the lane, but I see him gank my bot lane, well, of course we know he's bot, so it would be stupid to keep on standing here on this side of the lane. Just move to this side of the lane, position here, and because we know the enemy jungler was bot, so now he can't really gank us because we're already standing on this side of the lane. So if you have an idea, an assumption of where the enemy jungler is, or you know for a fact where he is, stand on the opposite side of the map and you will always be fine. A small side note again with that, even if the enemy is on this side of the map, sometimes I would still want to be on this side of the map as well, if my jungler is also on this side of the map. So let's say there's a dragon, and my jungler is on this side of the map, and I know the enemy jungler just ganked bot lane. It could still be smart to stand on this side of the map, even though I could get ganked, because my jungler is also here, and then I am quickly to react to a fight here. I'm already standing close. So it very much depends on the situation, but that's the theory about warding here the early lane phase, making sure you can join the early fights and you get there quicker than your mid lane opponent, and making sure that you don't die to those early ganks. If you use these variables and use them in game, you ward consistently at 230, things like that, you should be fine. And then one last thing about warding that I do want to mention is that sometimes you play a matchup in which you'll permanently get shoved in the early game. I'm thinking about, let's say you play Katarina into a Victor or something, or Katarina into a Syndra, whatever, right? If you play Katarina, you'll typically know that level 1, 2, 3, you just get permanently shoved on your turret, right? It is what it is. So once you're under your turret and you're stuck here, you need to farm minions, you're not in a position to ward. But you will have a trinket. You won't be able to use it because you will permanently be stuck in your turret. So we kind of want to fix that. So if I know that beforehand, before the lane starts, I know I'm going to get permanently shoved under my own turret, I will already place a ward before the lane starts here at 1 minute and 15 seconds on the enemy raptor camp. And then I walk back to lane, right? I walk back to lane. And now when the lane starts, I'm going to get shoved in. I stand under my turret. But at the very least, yes, I'm stuck here, but I already did get some value from my ward, because whenever the jungle comes here, I will spot him out. Even though right now I'm not in a position to move anymore, right? So that's also a great tip that I could give you guys. But that's it about warding. Now let's move on to the next concept. Okay guys, and now after all of that information, I kind of want to talk about, or I kind of briefly want to mention the basic trading fundamentals that on top of everything that you just learned, you need to do. Now, it's very simple. Let's start with the first one, level power spikes. Let's say I'm playing, so I'm actually going to delete this dummy. I'm going to place it there. So let's say I'm playing Victor versus Yone, right? Range versus melee champion. I know that in the early game, he can never walk up because I will punish him then, and then he will be low. So I will be able to push, and he will not be able to push. He will not be able to last hit as many minions, because if he keeps on walking up, I will attack him with my ranged spells and he will ultimately die. So he has to respect me level 1. We already established that. And that means that I will be the one pushing into him. And if I'm the one pushing into him, that means I will get level 2 quicker. If I get level 2 quicker, I don't just want to stand here and let him just chill there and then keep on using my abilities on the wave and pushing. That's the last thing I want to do, right? The moment I'm about to hit level 2, like if there's a minion here that's about to die and this is going to give me level 2, I already want to walk up while it's dying and then maybe auto-attack it while I'm already here, and now I can look to trade onto my opponent. You really need to prepare your level 2 power spike. And the same goes for your level 3 power spike, for your level 6 power spike. Now, this also works with other power spikes, right? This also works with your level 4 power spike, level 5 power spike, for sure. But the main power spikes are level 2, level 3, and level 6, because these power spikes will literally unlock new abilities for you on most champions, right? Some champions are weird, but on most champions, you will unlock new abilities on those power spikes. So keep that in mind. That's very important that you play around those level power spikes. You can always, or you can typically trade, like at least when the lane is even, and now you have a level power spike, you should be able to win trades, right? So level power spikes is one of those basic trading fundamentals that allow you to win the game. All right, next to that, the second power spike is going to be ability cooldowns. So that's another basic trading fundamental. Now, what do I mean with ability cooldowns? It means playing around your ability cooldowns and playing around the enemy ability cooldowns. It could be as simple as saying, this is a Yone, or like maybe let's make it a little bit easier. I'm playing Victor into Ahri, right? I'm playing Victor into Ahri, right? Now I need to be scared as Victor if I want to walk up, because she can charm and then Q me, right? So if I see that Ahri misses her E onto me for some reason, right? She misses her E and she used her Q on the wave, for example. The moment I see that she doesn't have E and Q, I can just walk up, and if she decides to not walk back, I can just take a trade for free with her. I don't know what the circle is here, this is bugged. But yeah, the moment she misses her E and uses her Q on the wave, she has nothing to trade with me, so then I can walk up, and if she is not walking back, not respecting me, I will just take a very good trade on top of her. Now let's say she is a good player, and she does respect me, like she knows she did her E and Q, so the moment she misses her E and uses her Q on the wave, she walks back, so I walk up, and she walks back, she walks all the way up to here. That's also fine. Yes, I'm not getting a good trade onto her, but I can zone her from taking minions. Maybe she's losing XP, or maybe she's losing gold. And that's also a win-win. So if you always pressure opponents when they don't have cooldowns, you can always get something, whether it's a good trade, or making them miss XP or gold from the minion wave, which is also really, really good. So that is, in fact, the second basic trading fundamental. Now, as for the third fundamental here that we're going to be talking about, that's going to be your minions' HP and the enemy minions' HP. It's very simple. In order to get gold and league consistently in League of Legends, gold and XP, you need to get minions, right? In order to get the gold, you need to last hit minions. That means that if your minions are low, there's a very high chance that your enemies are going to walk up to last hit a minion to get the gold from it. That means that every single time one of your minions is low, you can kind of predict that the enemy is going to walk up, and that gives you an opportunity to hit them with the spell. For example, here, I'm going to level up my E. So let's say there is a minion, I don't know, maybe like, let's say here, like if I place like, this is a minion, right? So let's say this is an enemy champion and the blue dummy here is a minion, right? So if I know that this minion is about to get low and my opponent is going to walk up, I will throw my E here in front of my opponent because I know he's going to walk up, right? So the moment I do E, he walks up and he's hit by it, right? So it's like free prediction, it's like free hits onto your opponent. So whenever your minions are low, look to trade with your opponent. That's a very good way to trade with them. And specifically when it's like a cannon minion, people are not willing to give up cannon minions, and then you get free trades. On top of that, the same concept works for you. If the enemy has a minion that's low, you need to know that if you play against a good player, he's also going to know that you're going to walk up, and he's going to throw his skill shots whenever you're going to walk up for this minion. Right? That's also very important. So how do you play around that? How do you counter that? Like, it's not like if your enemy always does spells when you want to farm, you will always lose minions, right? So how do you counter that, right? By baiting out enemy spells with your movement and with your, but like you're basically playing games with the enemy's mind. So for example, let's say this minion you want to farm, right? So rather than like walking up and taking damage from your opponent because he knows you're going to walk up, act like you're going to walk up and then back off in time. So for example, you act like you want to last hit the minion here, so you walk up, but then you instantly walk back. You walked up with the intention to instantly walking back because you thought the enemy would hit you. So now they do their skill shot, they miss it, and now you can walk up to either last hit this minion if it's still alive, or now at the very least your opponent's ability is down, so now you have time to do whatever you want. Now you can farm for a couple of seconds for free, or since his ability is down, now you can trade onto your opponent, for example, right? For free. So that's how you basically bait out abilities and play around this concept of hitting enemies when their minions are low. But you see, it ties into each other, these three basic fundamentals, right? It completely ties into each other. Like, for example, you walk up and then you walk back for when a minion is low to bait out an enemy ability. So now they don't hit you when you want to go for a minion. So now you can last hit it for free. And they also don't have an ability. It's on cooldown. So this is our second basic trading fundamental that we talked about. Now, next to being able to farm for free, we also have a free trading opportunity onto our opponent. Right. Now, I don't know when I queue what the circle is here. I think Victor is bugged right now, but it is what it is, right? So don't be distracted by that. But those are the three basic trading fundamentals that I really wanted to talk about because it's super, super simple, but in-game, it's not always easy to pressure your opponents with these three basic fundamentals every single time. Like, every single time a minion is low, you need to pressure them. Every single time they don't have abilities, you need to pressure them. It's very easy to sometimes forget about that or be lazy with that and start autopiloting, but then you're obviously not playing your lane good enough or well enough. So keep that in mind. These three basic trading fundamentals are super important to play your lane. All right, guys. So I quickly want to talk about recalling here as well. And let me start off by saying that first, in order for you to recall or to roam on the map, there are some conditions that need to be met. So first of all, if we want to recall or roam on the map, we all know that first we have to shove in the wave under the enemy turret, right? So that when we're recalling or roaming onto the map, the wave will be pushing towards us, and that's very good because we can come back and collect the wave, so we're not missing a lot of minions, and the enemies are missing a lot of minions. Now, let's show that, right? I'm going to quickly orchestrate this. It's not that difficult to understand for the people who don't know. But let's say, hey, I push in the wave under the enemy turret, right? And now I decide to roam. So I push in the wave under the enemy turret here, and I decided to roam to the top lane. If my enemy does not follow me and he wants to stay in the mid lane, how does he punish me? It's very simple. He tries to kill my next wave as quickly as possible. So his wave goes under the turret. My turret kills his minion, so I miss all of that gold. And he can potentially take plates. That's how he punishes me. So ideally, I don't only roam or recall when I push out the wave, that's condition number one, but I also make sure that when I recall and roam and I push out the wave, that my next wave that comes out of base or that has to spawn is a cannon minion wave. Because if my opponent first has to kill a cannon minion wave before he can push out his minions under my turret and then take plates, that will take longer than when he has to kill a normal wave. So I have more time to roam and come back or recall and come back and not miss as much and not give as many plates. So that's a very important concept that most people by now, I hope, they understand and they know and they actively do it in their games. Now, something that I do want to mention before I talk about something else here is that in mid lane specifically, and many people don't know this actually, but in mid lane specifically, after level 6, you typically don't want to do that. You really don't want to like recall when the enemies will have a cannon minion wave. And the reason is very simple, but many people don't notice, even like mid lane mains don't really notice. But cannon minion waves in the mid lane get more attack speed on the mid lane turret, which is crazy, right? So for example, if I am pushing with a cannon minion wave on this turret here, in the mid lane, specifically in the mid lane, the cannon minion will have extra attack speed on the mid lane turret. Meaning that it's a lot easier for me to take a couple of plates when I'm attacking the turret with a cannon minion wave than with a normal wave. Because cannon minions do a lot of damage, and they have increased attack speed in the mid lane here on the mid lane turret, so they will take plates very, very quickly. So what does that mean? That means that it's also a great strategy if you're playing like a mage, like a Victor or a Syndra, for example, or like Orianna, whatever. If you play mages who are like, or champions in general, that are very good at establishing prio in lane, like pushing opponents in and like dominating the lane, but they're not necessarily good at roaming. Like Victor, for example, is not necessarily good at roaming, right? Like I can constantly bully my opponent and push him in, but when it comes to actual roaming, I don't offer that much to the roam. It's not like I have a point and click CC like a stun. And also, when I come into the river and they have a Kha'Zix, he can just kill me, right? Like I can't really 1v1 those champions. So Victor's a great champion for lane prio, but not for roaming. What I like to do on those champions, knowing that cannon minions give extra attack speed or have extra attack speed when they're hitting the mid lane turret, is I like to all-in my mid lane opponent to either kill them or get them low, because even if they're low, they're forced to recall. So when my next wave is a cannon minion wave, or when my current wave is a cannon minion wave, I try to all-in my opponent. Whether I kill them or not doesn't matter. I just need to get them out of the lane. If they're dead, they're of course out of the lane. But if I can get them low with a full all-in with my ult EQ combo, and they're low, and now they're forced to recall, that's also fine. Because now, while they're recalling, I can attack this turret and get many, many plates because I have a cannon wave and cannon minions have an extra attack speed on the enemy turret. So that's a very important concept here. So it's not only about resetting on like or when to reset and how to reset, but it's also knowing this concept of the cannon minion wave in the mid lane specifically that allows you to force enemies to reset and abuse that to your advantage. On that same topic, of forcing enemies to recall and abusing it to your own advantage, is also talking about enemy power spikes. For example, if I'm playing Yone into a mage, right? Like right now, we're playing Victor, right? So if you play Victor, what is your ideal first recall? Your ideal first recall is Lost Chapter, right? That's 1.2k gold. If I have 1.2k gold on my first recall, that's amazing because Lost Chapter is amazing. Most mages, including Victor, have some mana issues. Lost Chapter is going to give me a lot of AP for more damage on my poke, for more wave clear, and for more mana that I can constantly just spam my abilities and make my lane opponent's life miserable. So if I get this, laning phase becomes a lot more difficult for whoever I'm facing. So if I'm playing like Yone into a Victor or into a Syndra, I really want to make sure that at some point I take a trade and force to make them recall before they have Lost Chapter. Right? That's very, very important. Or at the very least, I want to take a recall early on so that when I come back to lane with some gold spent, like 650 gold spent, for example, and they choose to not recall, to stay in lane to get Lost Chapter first, so they try to overstay, now you can make their life miserable for a while. And if they do match your recall, so you recall at 650 gold, and they do match your recall to also make sure that they spend their gold and stay even in lane with you in trading, then they didn't have their Lost Chapter. So that's also amazing. So you either try to trade with your opponent and force them to recall, or you try to take an early recall, so they're forced to recall to match your gold spending, right? So they can still match you in trades. That way, they can't get to their Lost Chapter, and that's a lot easier for you then to play the game. Also, when you play versus champions like a Zed, or like maybe even better champions like a Jace or something, but like champions in general, like a Talon or something that like to rush lethality, like a serrated Dirk, it's also good as like 900 gold, I think. So a Dirk is 900 gold, I think, or like it's 1,000 gold right now. So you kind of want to make them recall before they have this Dirk power spike in those type of matchups. So again, by taking early recalls, or by forcing them to recall by taking a good trade, for example, right? But forcing enemies to recall before these great power spikes like Lost Chapters, Serrated Dirks, or when you play versus a Yone or Yasuo, like making them recall before they have Berserker Grease, for example. Very important that you can do that. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about TP versus Ignite. Because this is something that will happen a lot in the mid lane, like because you have this big versatility of type of champions. For example, you can play an assassin like a Zed or an Akali, who typically like to run Ignite. And then you might want to face, the mages, for example, who are very common in the mid lane, and they typically like to run TP. So you're oftentimes going to have to deal with the Ignite versus TP advantage. I think first things first that you need to know is if you have Ignite, you can take very aggressive trades with your opponent typically, even if you play melee versus ranged. Because if both of you are low, the champion with the Ignite will always have the advantage because he will have the most kill pressure. Right? So that's always great. Now, of course, the champion with teleport, they basically have 2 HP bars. They can basically just like teleport back and they can be okay. Right? So your worst nightmare as an Ignite player is being in a lane, right? You're in a lane right now and the wave is like pushing into your opponent is low, but okay, they recall, they teleport back to lane, they spent all their gold, so you didn't kill them, they spend all their gold, they're full HP again, full mana, and now you're playing against a Lost Chapter Victor and you're playing just with a D-shield, for example, right? How are you going to play that lane? You're not. You're kind of going to be forced to recall, but if you recall here, if you recall and your wave is here, he's freezing the wave, you're going to miss an insane amount of minions. So it's like lose-lose. If you stay, you typically die, and it's miserable. If your recall is also miserable because you're going to lose a lot of minions. So in order to avoid that, typically as an Ignite player into a teleport player, I don't really use my Ignite pre-level 6. I use it more as a threat starting from level 6. Pre-level 6, I typically make sure that I get through the laning phase consistently because I know no matter what assassin I play at level 6, you can typically one-shot the mages. Pre-level 6, it's a bit more difficult. So then, pre-level 6, what do I focus on? Well, I focus on recalling before my teleport enemy player. If I do that, lane is successful and they can't use their teleport to bully me. Let me give you an example. Let's say we're playing versus a Victor and he has teleport. I'm Akali, and if I can manage to shove out the wave at some point here, crash the wave in his turret, and now I go for a recall, right? And Victor is stuck in his turret farming. While he's stuck under his turret farming the minions, I'm already in base spending my gold and walking back to lane. While I'm walking back to lane, he's going to start his recall because he killed the minions, right? He's going to recall. Okay, and then by the time I'm back, he still has to walk to lane, which is bad for him. So he would lose minions from that. Now, he could, of course, teleport back and then be at the same time as you in lane, even though you recalled quicker, which is annoying. But at the very least then, he had to use his teleport to match you, to like be at the same time in the lane as you. That's why he had to use his teleport then. Which is a lot better than using his teleport to keep you imprisoned in lane and to keep you stuck and constantly bully you with an item advantage and an HP advantage. Right now you will both be full HP, spend your gold, and he also had to use his teleport. So that's kind of your goal that you want to go for in the early lane. As an Ignite into teleport player, you want to recall before your teleport player, so that he has to use his teleport to match your time that you're in lane again with his teleport, and then he can't use it to abuse you, right? And then starting from level 6, you want to prepare your level 6 power spike, hold the wave on your side of the lane, and then look to all in him with your Ignite, and that's when you really have kill threat with your Ignite, right? So that's the way I view it, and that's the way you should definitely use it in your lane when you play Ignite versus TP. Now, as the Victor player, that's different. If I'm the Victor player, I need to make sure that my Akali, that the enemy Akali, can never shove in the wave under my turret, right? So as a Victor, typically into Akali, for example, you're going to push level 1, like you're going to slow push level 1, 2, 3, look to get her low, look to let the wave bounce back to you, and then look to freeze the wave here, right? You never want Akali to break this freeze here as the Victor. So if I'm the Victor, I never want the enemy Akali to break this freeze here. Because the moment she does, I'm going to be stuck in my turret farming minions, and she can recall, and then I will have to use teleport to match her tempo in the lane, which is bad. So you're going to have to do everything in your power to hold the wave here and not give Akali recall windows. So that's how you're going to have to play it as the range champion. Okay guys, now I'm going to be talking about tempo. And tempo is very important if you play a roaming oriented champion like an Akali or a Fizz or a Zed. Or if you play whatever champion in the game, but you're playing versus one of those roaming champions in the game. Now, tempo is always important, but it is very important in those situations that I just mentioned. Now, what do I mean with tempo? It's very, very simple. For example, let's say I'm playing Akali into a Victor or something, right? If I need to recall because I'm low and the enemy Victor wants to recall because he's also low and we're both sitting at a lot of gold, right? So we established I want to recall, Victor wants to recall. Well, if I can recall before the Victor, that's amazing. That's going to give me tempo. And the reason for that is very simple. Let's say I push in the wave, Victor is stuck in his turret, I already go here for a recall, right? So just like I just explained in the last concept when we talked about the Ignite versus Teleport, if I recall before my opponent, I will already start walking to lane when they're still in lane or only starting their recall. So that means I will get quicker in lane than they will, unless they have teleport, of course. But if they don't have teleport, I will get quicker in lane, while the Victor is maybe only here, in this position walking to lane, and I'm already here. What does that mean? That means that I right now am quicker in lane, so I can shift out the wave, push out the wave, so when Victor comes into lane, he is stuck under his turret farming here, so he's going to have to farm the minions here. But I already shifted out, so I can now choose to move and invade his jungle on the red, invade his jungler on the objective, look to dive the enemy top laner, look to dive the enemy bot laner. I can do whatever I want because I have tempo, right? Because I have tempo. So that's very, very important. So as a roaming champion, you want to create tempo. As a mage champion versus roam tempo, you want to deny the enemy laner tempo. And the main form, so I can't explain tempo like very in depth, or we're gonna, like this video is gonna be like 3 hours long. I just want to explain this as a fundamental. So the main time when I see people throwing their tempo and wasting their tempo and giving away tempo is when they're taking plates, right? So let's say you kill your opponent or your opponent is forced to recall, right? Many people have the right idea and they say, okay, my lane opponent is dead. So while they're dead, I can punish them even more. I can look to go to the dirt and take plates. Yes, that's true. But let's say right now I'm playing Victor and the enemy laner is, let's say, a Fizz. So I'm playing Victor versus Fizz. Fizz died in the roam that he did in the bot lane, which is good. So now me as the Victor, I walk up and I'm going to take plates. Now, if I see here above my minimap that Fizz is dead and he's dead for 10 seconds, it's okay to take a plate. But if I keep on attacking the third plates and I see that Fizz is going to be alive in 2 seconds, I already know I'm going to be behind in tempo. Because let's say Fizz already just respawned. He just respawned and I'm still taking the plate. I also need to recall, right? Typically, I'm also going to sit on gold. Fizz was dead, so he was able to spend some gold and become full HP again. So typically, I will have to match his recall to also be full HP, full mana, and spend my gold as well to be able to match him. Since he's already walking to lane and I still need to recall, I'm going to be later in lane than him again. I'm going to recall, spend my gold, but by the time I do all of that and walk to lane, he's already in lane. He will already have shift out the wave, and he will now also take plates or be able to roam. So because I, as the Victor, took plates too long, now he can also take plates or roam, right? So sometimes taking plates for yourself results in your mid laner also being able to take plates within a minute from now, just because you took plates for too long. And I hate plays like that. What I really want to do in League is I want to take plates without giving an opportunity to my opponent to also take a plate. What does that mean? That means that sometimes if you overstay and rather than just taking one plate, you take 2 plates and wait until the Fizz is already walking to lane, and only now you recall. Well, now when I recall and come back to lane, Fizz will also take 2 plates or he will roam. But let's say for the sake of this video that he takes plates. So then I took 2 plates and as a result, Fizz took 2 plates. So who won the trade? Nobody, right? It was just even. It's not really good, right? So I don't like plays like that. Instead, if you only took 1 plate and then saw that Fizz is about to respawn in like 10 seconds and then you instantly recall, both you here and Fizz are going to walk the lane at the same moment and you will be in the lane at the same moment. And that means that you can't just randomly roam and Fizz can't just randomly roam and both of you can't just randomly take plates, which is good because you already took 1 plate before you recalled. So do you rather take 1 plate and make sure that Fizz can't take a plate, or do you take 2 plates and let Fizz also take 2 plates? For me, it's very simple. I want to make the place where I get something and my mid lane opponent gets nothing. So that's what I mean with trying not to waste tempo, specifically when you're taking plates. That's when people throw away their tempo the most frequently. Right? But that's it. What I wanted to mention here about the mid lane fundamentals. I know there's quite a lot of information in this video, but I think that's also what makes this video so great. There's lots of information in there, and if you combine all this information, that's up to you, of course. If you combine all this information into your gameplay, you will see an immense amount of improvement. Because trust me, These are things that I can see in gold, but I can also see them in low masters or in diamond, right? People make these mistakes like over and over again. And the main gist is if you can do all of these concepts and you can do them consistently in your lane, you will always have a perfect lane phase and you will be great at laning in League of Legends. I know a lot of people struggle with that. That's why I made this video. So hopefully this helped you out. Now, thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions or if you have any suggestions for future videos, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you for watching this video. Feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. It would help me out a lot. And hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Bye.